Hi, my name's Hugh from the Mini Specialist, and today I'm going to take you through how to do a supercharger service on a Mark 1 Mini Cooper S. So this car behind me is an 06 plate supercharged model, and what we have to do is you have to take the bumper off, take the radiator off, to take the supercharger off, to drain the oil from the various chambers, and I'll take you through that now. Is to take the wheel arch liners out, which I've done on this car on both sides, and then I need to take the bumper off, which will give me access to the crash bar, which will come off, and then I'll take the radiators out. So if your car has air conditioning, you will need to drain that. So this rad here is the air conditioning rad, and this is the supply and return for the air conditioning coolant. A quick way to test whether there's any gas in there is to take the cap off, which I've done, and then just put a screwdriver in there. I've already drained this one, and you can hear there's no pressure in there now. So because I've already taken the gas out, I can now take the radiator off, the air conditioning radiator off, which is this one, to allow me full access to the front of the car. So with the bumper off, we take the crash bar off, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts, both sides. So as it comes off, you've got that sensor there, that'll just feed through the gap. I need two hands really, but you can see that needs to be fed through, and then the crash bar will come off quite easily. Right, to get the next bit off, we have to take these bars off here. Now there's 2 bolts underneath, just there and there, okay, and they just pop out. So that will allow us to take this plastic off, which is already loose, and it's just been held on by that blocking it, and then the rubber hoses, so that's the next bit. Right, so here we go. Those 10mm bolts, so they shouldn't be tight. And now this should just come out easily. There might be a bit of a release on the pressure, but there shouldn't be anything really in there. I always put the bolts back in, just so that I can find them again. I know which ones came out for reassembly. Makes life a bit easier. I'm going to leave the radiator, the aircon radiator, attached to the other radiator. There's no need to take it off because the whole thing's coming off anyway. At the top here is the radiator hose. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this radiator hose here, and probably this one as well, so that I can just flop this forward, take the radiator off. But I'm now going to drain the radiator from the bottom of the car. Now there's no radiator bleed screw on these cars, you've got to take the hose off. And this is the sort of tool that you need. Very, very handy, not very expensive, so it's worth getting. The only thing left to remove are these wires, which will be fed through the black plastic. Is to release the horn connector. Final thing is this radiator fan connector. So it's a pretty monstrous connection here, but we need to disconnect it. And that's just a lead. There we go, it comes off, and that needs to twist off to allow me to take the front of the car. I think it should twist 90 degrees and actually come out. There we go. So, here we go. There's still going to be some water in that rad. So if I can free the aircon pipe, there we go. So here we are then with the front of the car off. This is called service mode. And now we can see the full extent of what we need to take off. So this is the air conditioning compressor, that's the alternator. What we need to do is to remove the dipstick housing and 1 or 2 of these bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the water pump. We need to take the pressure off the auxiliary belt. We need to take the intercooler off. When that's all off, then we can remove the supercharger and drain it of oil. Just a little bit of an aside here. While this is in pieces, it's a very good idea to take this off. Now, for ease, I've got another one. And this, when you take off the radiator fan area, in here is a ballast resistor for the fan. And these perish, and you can see this one's dead. So that is broken circuit, which means the fan won't cut in. So you can either replace the whole unit or more sensibly get a new ballast resistor and solder it in. So all it takes is to cut these wires, reconnect them, put it back together. Clearly the car's in bits. If you do it at this stage, it's no big shakes. If you have to do it separately, obviously you've got to take the front off. Right, so now with the front off, I've got access to a lot more. So what I'm going to do is take the intercooler off and start taking some of the other parts away, so give me access to remove the supercharger. So let's get the intercooler off first. And when you put this rubber seal back on, make sure you don't crimp it in some area. If you crimp it and air gets in there, you'll get a squeal. It's the same effect as blowing across a milk bottle top. You've got passing air over a gap. And because of the volume of air that's going through this intercooler, it will squeal quite shrilly. You won't be able to miss it. So now we have access, a little bit more access anyway. Take some of these electrical connections off. These, it's a squeeze and a pop out. That goes down to the knock sensor underneath here, and this hose is held on with a 10mm bolt there. So one of the things we have to be very careful of is the removal of this pipe here. It's a breather pipe. It goes up to the top and into the crankcase at the top. But this gets old, and as it ages, it gets brittle. So to get it off, we lift and push that down. Lift, push down, and that pops out. When you feed it through, just take great care. It might be better as well to take it off from the top, just to place it out of harm's way. If you break it, well, you're going to have to wait for another one to arrive before you can reassemble the car. So I try and take it off in one piece carefully and lay it aside. When you put it back, don't forget it goes through the 1, 2, 3rd hole and into this area here. To release tension from the auxiliary belt, you're going to need a tool, something like this. And what we do is we put it onto this nut here and pull against that. And I'll move the camera in a minute so you can see. I'll take the dipstick out so it's out of my way. So it goes on that bolt there, and then underneath. So on the bolt and underneath there, and then you pull against that. And as you pull back, you should see that that allows you to put that, compresses that spring there. And as you compress that spring, so what I've got is some long nose pliers and a thin Allen key. What I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze that to a point where I can see a hole in that thing that comes out the spring and pop the Allen key in there. Easier said than done. Right, so I've managed to pin it off camera. But if you look down there now, you see there's an Allen key poking out that hole. So it's difficult to do, you need 2 hands, but that bolt there, you put the tool on that and you push against the surface below to squeeze that spring in, and now you can take the alternator belt off, the auxiliary belt off. At this stage, take a picture of the way the belt threads, because I guarantee when you come to put it back together, it's going to be difficult to remember. Also, inspect the belt. I mean, this has got some wear on it in some odd places. I don't understand why it's gone that way. Normally they crack on the inside, but as you've got the thing in pieces, these aren't expensive belts. I suggest you just replace it as a matter of course. So now I'm going to take off this air intake going to the throttle body, which is under here, because we do need to take off these bolts here, these 10mm, to release the throttle body from the rest of the housing. So that's the next stage. Right, so now I'm going to remove the dipstick housing. So it's a bit of a fiddle. There we go. Now usually, this leaks, there's a rubber O-ring on there. See there's a bit of contamination on it. give it a good clean, and I'll put some silicone sealant on that on reassembly to make sure that it doesn't leak. You should make sure you block this off so no water can get into the sump, because when you take the supercharger off, water will flow down the back of the supercharger. So now what's holding it on, apart from the main bolts, this needs to come off, and at the back, you just about see that connector there. That's a water pipe that needs to come off. So to gain access, I'm going to take this one off. I need to take the throttle body bolts off, which go into there, and this one here needs to come off as well. This is a once-use clip. It's all pretty dirty, but that needs to be snapped off and replaced with Jubilees when you put it back on. So when that's off, and the hose pipe is off there, and the throttle body's off, we should be able to remove these, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and next stage is to take the alternator off. Now, because this wire here is live, it's a good idea now to disconnect the battery if you haven't already done so. This connector is for the regulator. That should just pop out, and then take this off. As I say, disconnect the battery first. We have to take the throttle body off, which is this. There's 4 10mm bolts. I've taken them out. That's those. So to get this intake off, you can see there's a red collar. That's another air vacuum hose. Needs to come off. And I'm going to take this pipe off as well, which is a typical fixing to make the access a bit easier. So I've already taken the nut out of there. This needs to come off before we can take the rest of the unit out. See, I've removed this pipe now. I've freed this off. There are in fact 2 vacuum pipes behind there. We're going to just move this off like this forward to gain some access. You see there's a seal in here. We will replace that seal. Right. It's quite difficult to get this off, but I'm going to now use 2 hands and just do the same as I did for this one. You push that in and allow the pipe to go out behind it. So using a pry tool and a pair of long-nosed pliers, I can pull the red collar towards me and push the pipe away. And so that just releases those 2 pipes, and then this can be taken away. Actually, I'm going to give this a damn good clean. So now this intake's been removed. If we look back here, we can see the final. There's a pipe there. Now that needs to be taken off. Difficult to get to. That's the next thing, and then I can take off the supercharger. So let's do that now. Yeah, I can get the tool on it now. Push that clip back. Water everywhere. Right, that's good. I can move that now. Totally. Okay, I'm just going to leave the bolt in there because I don't need to take the whole thing off. It's just it's attached to the supercharger. And now I can remove the supercharger bolts. Actually, move back up. I forgot to take off. So as I said before, disconnect the battery now to take off the alternator, which it's just 3 bolts now. And there's 2 connectors on the alternator. Put my pliers on this one. Bit of a squeeze. There we go, pops out. Now I need 10mm. I have had problems with this before with the fixings break. But I'm just going to try and spin it off. There we go. What alternator? And now then, one underneath. One here. Another one here. So, there's a very long one, and so I forget these. You've got a very long one, 2 medium, and 1. The back one is at the bottom. We should now be able to move this off. What's holding it is a connector, as I said, from the water pump that goes into the engine. Also, the pipe. I've released the fixing on the pipe, so it's got to persuade that. Okay, it's got to be moved off. Right. And there is the water coming out. That's why we put the bolt over the dipstick hole. There we go, one supercharger. Behind the supercharger, that there is a knock sensor. So if that goes, it's quite difficult to get to, as you can see. That's the water intake from the water pump. That's an oil pressure sensor. I'm going to take that out and clean it and reseal it. The rest of the engine behind the supercharger is really clean, which is good to see. So now with our somewhat cleaner supercharger on the bench, what we're going to do is remove this hex key nut here. This is on the pulley end, and replace the oil. The other one is here. Just about to see it there. And that comes out, and we drain the oil from these chambers and replace it with new oil. So what I'm going to do is drain the pulley end first and see how much oil comes out. So here goes. Invert the supercharger and pour out the oil. It's pretty dark. Now there should be about 140 mils in there, and gosh, I'll get a bit more coming out now. Seems to be about it. So that's our oil. It's not really very much, is there? Should be a lot more than that. So I'm now going to refill the supercharger with oil. I use oil sent to me by this guy from the S Works, and it's the supercharger oil for the Eaton supercharger to the OEM spec. So 140 mil goes in the pulley end. So this is 50 mil. The first lot's going to go in. Just squirt it in. That's the second 50 mil. And then the final 40. So with that done, I'm just going to seal it, put the plug back in. It's not necessary to take the water pump off. You can get to the plug. So there's our drain plug. I'm now going to invert this and pour out whatever oil is in there. If there's only a ton. Nothing in there, not a drop. Right, so the water pump side takes 40 mil of oil, so that's all we need. Let's stick this in. That's done, job done. All right, so we now have a fully serviced supercharger. Just got to put it back on now. So this rubber ring here, I normally change. This goes into the block and supplies water from the pump into the block. So we're just going to change this O-ring. It's gone rather flat. And there's the new one. So that's that. So before we reassemble the car, I'm just going to take out this sensor, which oil pressure sensor, and reseal it, give it a clean. It seems like a missed opportunity just to give this area a good clean and a reseal. So there's our oil pressure sensor. So in this kit from the S Works, you get a new oil ring for the oil sensor. So this is the old one, and you can see it's flatted off as well. I generally use a bit of Vaseline on O-rings just to give them a bit of lubrication. So it just helps keep it all tight. So let's put that on there. So now you can see this whole area is nice and clean and ready to go back together. Right, so we're going to put the supercharger back on. I'm just going to put a bit of Vaseline around this new oil ring here, O-ring here as well, and then mate it up to the car. So I'm just going to make sure these are tight. They don't have to be mega tight. I'm just making sure that they are able to come off in a hurry. Fine. So that's our supercharger in place. And I'm just going to put this bracket back on the other end, so that's for the tensioner. That's zipped up. 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and we have a very nice clean area. That's got a cleaned and O-ringed on that. I need to put a new O-ring on here, or seal it in some way for the dipstick. That pipe there, don't forget when you put that on, you've got to bring that fixing closer so it goes on there so it doesn't leak. And these two go on the intake. So if that's, I'll take this off as well. I've got a new one of those. So in the kit from the S-Works, you get a new bit of rubber there and a new seal for the intake. So here's my cleaned up intake, and that just goes into there. The intake as well. So there we go. Bit of Vaseline on the inside. Just makes it a bit easier. Well, it's a lot easier actually. There we go. Before I do that, I am going to put that clip back on the hose. Get that away from it. Okay, good, that's done, fine. So, that can now go back under here. As I'm putting this on, it's a good idea to put these in if you can, to line these up and then pop that up. It's a bit fiddly. Some of those pliers are always useful, and I should just go inside grip. Yeah, they've gone straight in. So it is a bit fiddly to get this in, so what I've got to do is line up the throttle body before I zip up these two Jubilee clips and tighten this bolt up here. So I'm now going to reconnect the throttle body, make sure everything's aligned. Quite a long 10mm bolts, so they just drop back in there. Okay, so we have our throttle body on. We have our new bit of hose on there, and the zipped up with the Jubilee clips this time. This one's a bit of a tight fit to get it into that slot there, but you just do what you can. I'm now going to put this hose back on, and I'm going to put this this vacuum pipe back in. This, just make sure that comes out, because that is actually the knock sensor. It's easy to forget and do this dangling underneath. It's not impossible to fish out, but it's just easier to do this the first time round. So here's our vacuum. So it feeds down here. Yeah, down the back. And into there and onto there. Okay. Good. Okay, good. Getting there. Getting there. Right, so get the alternator back on. You don't just go mad. So that's on. All right, dipstick. Okay, so we now have the alternator back on, the dipstick back in and screwed in, the wires all routed through, supercharger's back on. We've got to put our new pulley and the auxiliary belt on, which we'll do now. And then it's a case of putting the front back on. So we are, getting there, aren't we? As you can see, I fast forwarded now to the end. There's no difference really in terms of putting it back together. It's just the reversal of taking it apart. The only thing now is to refill the coolant, which I'm doing now. That's the bleed screw. So just make sure that this is all full of water, and recharge the air conditioning if you've drained it. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Any questions, please ask them below and I'll reply as soon as I can. And please subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you like what you see. Appreciate it. Bye for now.